Welcome back to Bad Things in History, where we make you feel better about yourself in comparison with much of the rest of humanity. Or maybe we make you feel awful to be a human. Or maybe you don't feel a thing in the face of history's horrors, in which case maybe one day you will do something covered in an episode. Speaking of which, what is the most efficient and painless way to end a person's life? This question has occupied the minds of political and social leaders for centuries. As technology changes and as societies evolve, the answer to this question becomes increasingly elusive. The modern world is especially sensitive to public displays of suffering and death, and that is part of the reason why most criminals today are executed with powerful drugs. Today we are going to look at the history of lethal injection. Birth of an idea. In the 19th century, criminals that were executed in the United States and Europe could meet their end in a variety of ways. The condemned could be beheaded, though that was rare. Most likely a person would meet death from hanging. Being killed with a bullet was also common, and by the late 1800s, electrocution was becoming a new and attractive option. Governments, as well as those in the medical community, were becoming concerned about the issues that occurred when criminals were killed. For instance, death by hanging should be nearly instantaneous. In practice, mistakes frequently led to the condemned prisoner suffocating for several minutes. Firing squads should, in theory, be highly effective, but those carrying out the sentence could miss the target. Then the prisoner may slowly bleed out and die over several minutes instead of meeting death right away. Julius Mount Bleyer was a doctor in New York. He specialized in treating issues with the throat. He also had a deep interest in how medicine and the law worked together. In 1888, Julius was assigned to a commission to study capital punishment. Julius examined executions from all over the world. He wanted to explain what was wrong with current methods and propose a more humane way to kill. He provided one example of a failed hanging from England. Last winter in England, a condemned man was on the scaffold. The last word had been spoken, the bolt was drawn, but the drop did not fall. The convict was removed, the apparatus was tested, and again the intended victim was put in position. A second and a third time did the drop fail to act when released. And then the poor fellow, who had thrice looked death calmly in the face, fainted and was carried back to his cell. His sentence was commuted, and the people said amen. Julius Mount Bleyer also went on to say that electrocution may be painless. Nobody knew for sure at the time, since it had only been tested on dogs and rabbits. But he was sure there was an easier way to kill convicted killers. Julius suggested that they should be injected with a fatal amount of morphine. Using this method, the prisoner would simply fall asleep, then stop breathing. If it didn't work the first time, just inject more. The death would be quick, easy, and shouldn't disturb spectators. It would be almost 100 years before this became the standard way to eliminate criminals. Nazi Germany would soon prove how effective it could be. Involuntary euthanasia. In the early 20th century, medicine as a profession was not always ethical by today's standards. It was a common belief at the time that people who were disabled should not reproduce. Several countries, including the United States and Canada, even had laws that required people with certain disabilities to be forcibly sterilized. In the 1930s, Hitler decided that depriving the disabled of children wasn't enough. It was cheaper for everyone if these people were simply killed instead. Thus, the Aktion T4 campaign was started in late 1939. Karl Brandt was Hitler's doctor. He was also given the job of killing the handicapped. The first case involved two parents who sent a petition to the government. They wanted their son to be killed as an act of mercy. Hitler told Karl to give them their wish. At first, the Nazis used gas to kill. It was cheap and convenient. But as the campaign to eliminate social undesirables progressed, the German doctors started killing more and more children. After all, the easiest way to prevent disabled adults from reproducing is to not let them grow up. As with most things, the Nazis created a system with brutal efficiency. They created several extermination centers at existing psychiatric hospitals. The parents of disabled children were then notified that their children needed to be taken to a place for special treatment. Once the parents surrendered their children, they would receive death certificates in return days or weeks later. The cause of death was usually listed as pneumonia. In reality, doctors were killing these children by injecting toxic chemicals into their veins. Most of the time they used phenol. Phenol is a chemical used in creating plastics. It can also be used as an anesthetic. Nazis chose to use it because it's cheap to manufacture. Parents started to realize what was happening and quit sending their children voluntarily. The Nazis responded with more forceful methods. By 1941, over 5,000 children had been killed by lethal injection. It would be comforting to think that the staff at these hospitals only carried out executions because Hitler forced them to do it. But the last child to be killed was in Bavaria on May 29, 1945. Allied troops had occupied the town 3 weeks before. Despite the fact they chose to kill defenseless children, the Nazis did prove that lethal injection was extremely effective. By the 1980s, the United States thought this method might deserve another chance. Chapman's Protocol. For much of the 20th century, the United States used electrocution to kill criminals, but it wasn't as fast and painless as advocates had claimed. It could take several tries to kill a person, and even when it worked, the sights and smells could induce vomiting among spectators. Jay Chapman was a physician and the chief medical examiner for the state of Oklahoma. He decided to propose a less painful method of execution. This method used a specific approach to administer a lethal injection. It became known as Chapman's Protocol. Jay Chapman suggested the following. An intravenous saline drip shall be started in the prisoner's arm, into which shall be introduced a lethal injection consisting of an ultra-short-acting barbiturate in combination with a chemical paralytic. The Oklahoma state legislature passed a bill adopting lethal injection. By 2004, at least 37 states adopted similar protocols. For the most part, criminals in the United States today are killed with drugs. When a prisoner is executed, it begins with the condemned being strapped to a gurney. Then an intravenous line is inserted into each arm. Only one is needed to deliver the drugs. The second one is used as a backup in case something goes wrong with the first one. The intravenous line going into the prisoner's arm is connected to another line in a nearby room. Before inserting any of the lines, the needles are sterilized and the injection sites are cleaned. People may wonder why this is done, since the goal is to kill the prisoner. The reason is because it is possible to receive a stay of execution. In that case, prison officials wouldn't want an infection to occur that could later kill the prisoner. The procedure also protects prison officials in case they are stuck by a needle. Once everything is set up correctly, a saline drip is started in both arms. This is mostly done to make sure the lines are working correctly. When it looks like fluids are flowing properly, then a heart monitor is attached to the prisoner. 3 separate injections are given to end the person's life. The first renders the victim unconscious within a few seconds. The second drug is a muscle relaxer. It causes the diaphragm to relax, which in turn keeps the prisoner from breathing. The third drug increases potassium in the blood, which in turn causes the heart to stop. In reality, a prisoner should die quickly and without pain. But as with most execution methods, reality is usually much different. Although doctors created the protocol, they refused to participate in executions. Unlike their counterparts from 100 years ago, the medical profession today takes ethics seriously. This means that prison officials with inadequate medical training are usually the ones giving injections. When it works as planned, the prisoner goes to sleep. About 7 minutes later, the heart stops and the execution is over. In Ohio in 2006, the execution of prisoner Joseph Lewis Clark took an hour and a half because there were issues finding his veins. They again had a problem executing Christopher Newton in 2007. Christopher was overweight, and prison officials couldn't get the lines inserted into his veins properly either. It took over 2 hours and 10 attempts before they were finally able to kill him successfully. Ohio attempted to address its problems with lethal injection by moving to a single drug protocol. Instead of 3 separate injections, they now use 1 large dose of barbiturates to cause death. This was first used in 2011 and worked as planned. It has been difficult for states to carry out executions in the past decade. Several companies that produce the drugs used to kill prisoners refuse to sell them to prison officials. Doctors refuse to assist in any way. As a result, some prisons are now killing the condemned with drugs that are normally reserved to euthanize pets. In addition to the United States, several other countries still use lethal injection. The most notable are China and Vietnam. China uses a single injection to kill prisoners. Vietnam was using a 3-injection protocol. Once they had difficulty acquiring drugs, the country switched to shooting prisoners or using other available poisons. Is execution by lethal injection really more humane than other options? Many opponents believe it is not. Cruel and unusual. If medical professionals were supervising lethal injections, then it might be the most humane method for killing. But since prison officials are the ones who carry out a death sentence, the required expertise is not there. Opponents to lethal injection claim that the incompetence of those who carry out injections is why the method is really an act of cruelty. As mentioned previously, sometimes a prisoner can be stuck with large needles again and again for over an hour as attempts are made to find a suitable vein. When the drugs are finally given, there is no oversight to make sure it's in the correct amount. Prisoners are not monitored to see if the drugs work as intended. Only medical professionals have the skills required to monitor patients that closely, so it simply isn't possible for those who work in prisons to ever implement lethal injection correctly all the time. Experiencing numerous puncture wounds could be the most pleasant part of the experience when lethal injection goes wrong. In 2005, researchers from the University of Miami examined drug concentrations in executed prisoners to see if it worked as intended. The researchers found that in 88% of the executed prisoners, the sedative levels in their blood were lower than that required for surgery. 43% had levels so low that they were probably completely aware of what was happening. The injection site where the drugs are delivered would cause extreme pain to victims who were conscious. As the muscles were paralyzed and the condemned began to suffocate, there would be panic and anxiety. But since the prisoner can't move, spectators wouldn't notice. Finally, the drug that caused the heart to stop would also be very painful, as it triggered a fatal heart attack. Although opponents to lethal injection claim it is too cruel and shouldn't be used, the courts have not been convinced. Several states continue to use this method of execution today. Lethal injection is just one more example of the conflicting nature of humanity. While promoting the idea of humane treatment, medical science unleashed a more efficient way to kill. And when doctors realized it wasn't ethical to participate, they left it in untrained and incompetent hands. Is there a perfect way to humanely and painlessly kill those sentenced to death? If so, it hasn't been found yet. The quest undoubtedly continues. What do you think about lethal injection? Tell us in the comments below, if you feel like sharing. If you found this episode interesting, then it would be great if you hit that like button for us, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. The only thing we have running through our veins is the depressing nature of humanity's horrible past. It makes us feel better to know you're watching. We also have a Patreon page if you want to lift our spirits that way. The link is in the video description. Thank you for watching Bad Things in History.